One of the other places I'd really recommend that you go to find more information for wiring is ls1tech.com. That's a forum for all kinds of things related to the whole LS engine series. People who still have them in the original cars, Camaros and Firebirds. There's specific forums on internal engine, external engine, but the one that I get most enthused about and where I spend most of my time is the one called conversions and hybrids. Now when they say hybrids, we're not talking about little diesel engines running some kind of a generator. We're talking about the hybridization of one brand of vehicle and a different brand of engine. An amazing amount of information. Guys who've been through all of this stuff before and are willing to share that information. It's been a really big help. This very late model displacement on demand engine yet. So some of the wiring diagrams and those kinds of things don't apply, but still I learned some really important things. Like, for example, one of the guys said, if you really want to narrow all this down, if you just took all of the pink wires and you had those hot when the key is on, and you take all of the orange wires and you make those hot all the time, you're going to be pretty close to making this thing run, with a few additions like the fuel pump and the starter relay. So that kind of information is really helpful. So I'd really recommend lstech.com, ls1tech.com. You'll find other things, little hints there, which I didn't understand what the guy meant when I first read it. He mentioned that the vehicle that his engine came out of had two fuse boxes, one under the hood and one inside the cab. And that he couldn't make the transmission work when he first took things up, and he discovered by following the wiring diagrams that actually a wire went from the transmission up to the ECM, in through good old connector, I believe it's called C107 that I talked about before, where we pulled some of the drive-by-wire stuff out of it. It went into the cab, back to the fuse panel, which in a Trailblazer is actually under the back seat, turns around and comes back to this fuse panel, goes through another fuse, and finally goes back back to the transmission control module, I believe. So when I read that and was following around and looking at different circuits in the wiring diagram in the Helms manual, I saw that exact thing had happened, and so I knew that I needed to take one of these wires, cut it, and bring it back up here to this fuse panel, to this fuse panel, and use one of the fuses that otherwise would be unused. There was no reason to go off someplace else to a fuse and come back. So those are the kinds of things that a little bit of time with a good factory wiring diagram and just taking it one circuit at a time, it begins to sort itself out. And yes, it still looks intimidating to see all of these wires running around the outside of their shield, but once I get those bundled back together, it really is going to be pretty easy. They're only going to be, my estimation is, about 6 or 8 wires that actually have to be hooked to the vehicle, other than if I want to go ahead and hook up things like the cruise control and a few things like that. But the basics of getting the engine to run and being connected to the ignition switch and those kinds of things, it's going to be actually pretty simple.